Okay, brethren, last week we looked at the fourth and final passage in the Bible that people often go to try to demonstrate that Rome is going to be the agent most culpable at the end of the age for attacking the saints and causing mayhem on the earth, right? And that was in Daniel chapter 7, where there is this fourth beast. And the fourth beast, people say, well, that's Rome. And like I was explained many times, I don't think that is Rome. Now, the fourth beast was a great and terrible beast, and it appears later on in Scripture in the book of Revelation, chapter 13, which we did look at briefly last week. And when you get to Revelation 13, which is in the end times, you find you're looking at a composite beast, a beast that has parts of a leopard, parts of a lion, right, and so on, parts of a leopard, and it's a composite beast. It is empowered by the dragon, by the devil. It's empowered for apparently 42 months, about 3.5 years, during which time it persecutes, attacks, harasses, makes war against the saints, and unfortunately, it says, overcomes them. So that's end time. It's going to be an interesting beast if you come across it, right? And I've said last week and other weeks why I don't believe that this fourth terrible beast of Daniel 7 or the beast of Revelation 13 is not Rome. For example, the fourth beast of Daniel chapter 7, it tells us there it will pulverize, smash in pieces, fragment all others. And the word there, the word is dekak, D-E-Q-A-Q. Right, an Aramaic word as it happens, which means to pulverize, to fragment, to break to pieces. And Rome, of course, as I said before, never did that. And if it wasn't Rome, who might it be? And I said, my best conclusion is that the empire in question is the Islamic empires, because the Islamic empires, initially the one in Arabia, the one that followed immediately after Muhammad, burst forth from Arabia, and it conquered Persia and Babylon and the area of Alexander's Greek Empire in no time at all. And it did smash it to pieces, pulverized it, the culture, the religion, the language, everything. So my best estimate is that the empire, the fourth and terrible empire of Daniel 7, the Revelation 13 empire, is the Islamic empire in its end time manifestation, right? And even 1400 years on from these events, Islam still dominates all those areas. Turkey, Asia Minor, Saudi Arabia, North Africa, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, right? All of those areas are Muslim areas today. So it hasn't gone away. It's still there, still dominates. And, you know, the Muslims today occupy about 25% of the world's population, nearly 2 billion out of 8 billion. They occupy about 25% of the countries on the earth. They would be majority Muslim countries. And they occupy about 25% of the landmass of planet Earth. And the political objective of Islam is to conquer the whole world for Allah, right? And if necessary, using force. So therefore, having Islam turn up as the end time beasts is, quite plausible, because that's what they themselves have announced they want to do. Now, last week we were in Revelation 13, and we looked at the first beast, this composite beast. Then we turned to look at another beast. That's where I want to start today. So if you want to turn to Revelation chapter 13, we're going to read once again about this second beast in the book of Revelation. So that's Revelation 13. We're going to read verses 11 to 18. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and spoke like a dragon. Lamb, innocent, peaceful, almost like Jesus, but speaking like a dragon. Dragon typically we think of as the devil. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast, this composite beast, leopard, lion, bear, and so on. He exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. to worship in the sense of bowing down to, genuflecting in front of, admiring, acknowledging. He performs great signs, so that he even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast. So a very deceptive false prophet who deceives the whole world by signs, does amazing things. Will he deceive you? Will he deceive me? I hope not, because we've got the story already ahead of time. We're being warned here. He will deceive the earth by marvelous signs and wonders. Oh, my word, look what he did there. Oh, that's incredible. Did you see that? It'll be on TV. Millions will see it. Tens of millions will see it, and they'll be deceived. Verse 14 again, he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived. An image of some sort to the beast. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. And Revelation 20 suggests that those who don't worship the image of the beast, take its mark, will be beheaded. You can probably think of one particular group who are renowned for beheading. Verse 16, he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, in other words, everybody, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. All highly mysterious language, right? But you can see this false prophet here, this other beast here, is very powerful. Deceives the whole world, creates an image. You have to worship the image or you'll be killed, right? The image, it says here, will speak, all right? From verse 15, he was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and so on. So this image that's created to the number one beast, this image will speak. And if you don't worship it, you'll be killed, probably by beheading. Doesn't say that there, but it's what it says in Revelation 20. Okay, so at this stage, I want to say that we're going to look at the image today and the mark, see if we can get better understanding of them before we get to that period of time when they're actually there in front of us. And inevitably, it's going to be somewhat speculative, so I have to ask my friend, my rubber chicken, Mr. Nebuchadnezzar, to be here to remind us when we're talking speculatively. Now, we're going to read the words. We just read the words. So it's good to be familiar with the words. What does the narrative of the Bible say? We should be familiar, very familiar with that, so that when these things come to pass right in front of our eyes, or we see them on a tablet screen or on the TV, we go, oh, that's precisely what I've been reading in Revelation 13, or Daniel 7, or Revelation 12, or whatever, right? If we know the narrative, if we know the story, we know the words, we can recognize it. So what we're trying to do now is, ahead of time, try to examine, explore what these things could be. And I don't think there's a problem with that. We can exercise our minds as long as we realize that we might be speculating. It might help us, sharpen up our understanding. And then when we see the actual events come to pass, we think, oh, I was slightly off there, but by and large, I think it was, 90% of the way there. So if we're clued up ahead of time, it may well help us. So first of all, let's examine what this image of the beast might be. Well, there's one particularly interesting candidate, if Islam is the answer, which I believe it is, not Rome. If you think it's Rome, I've no idea where you're going to go, but if you think it's Islam, then one potential candidate that might well be classed as the image of the beast would be what they call the Kaaba. Kaaba. The Kaaba you'll find in Mecca, the holy city of the Muslims, and in particular on the Kaaba, in one of the corners is something called the Black Stone, right? Now, you've seen the Kaaba before, but I think we've got at least one or two slides we can show you. Just as a reminder, that's the Kaaba, big black box. You can see the top left there on the bottom left. And in the bottom left picture, you can probably see thousands or tens of thousands of Muslims there walking around it, because that's what they do. That's Mecca in the top right there. It's a beautiful modern city visited by lots of folk on an annual basis. I get one more slide. Yeah, there's the Black Stone, all right, on the left there. So we'll come back to that slide in a moment or two, but just so you got the idea, you got the Kaaba and the Black Stone is a part of the Kaaba. Well, even today, the Muslim world, Muslims pray 5 times a day to the Kaaba, right, in Mecca. So they find out the direction. If you go to a mosque, there's a thing on the walls of the mosque that tells you that way's the Kaaba, and then you point towards it and you pray towards it. If you haven't got, if you're not in a mosque, then you can use a compass, or nowadays people use their smartphones, because you take them out and press where's the Kaaba and it tells you that direction, and you pray 5 times a day to the Kaaba. So already they're worshipping the Kaaba, right? And then if you're in good health and you've got the money, you are required at least once in your life to travel to Mecca and make pilgrimage to the Kaaba. It's called the Hajj, H-A-J-J, and it was just earlier this month, I think the 4th of June to the 9th of June this year. People headed off to Mecca to go round and round the Kaaba to reach out and attempt to touch the Black Stone. Many people also kiss the Black Stone, so you're touching it, you're kissing it, you're praying to it, you're worshipping the Black Stone on the Kaaba. And that's what Muslims do today. I think the Saudi Arabian government said that a total of 1.67 million people visited the Kaaba during the Hajj this year, of which 1.5 million came from other countries. You know, people traveling from Britain, from the US, from Australia, from South Africa, Muslims everywhere travel, you know, to do the Hajj, the pilgrimage, right? So you've got here already a stone, which is an image, right? It's an image that people currently worship if they are Muslims, right? And it's not going to be a great surprise if in the end times many, many more people are encouraged or even mandated to worship the Kaaba and the Black Stone. And it says here in Revelation 13 verse 15, he was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, etc. So the image of the beast in the end times will speak. Well, strangely enough, Islamic prophecy expects the Black Stone to speak in the end time. I think we can put that slide back up again. I'll read that to you just in case your screen's not super sharp. So the first comment at the top, the Black Stone will come forth on the day of resurrection and will testify, in other words, speak and be a witness in favour of those who touched it in truth. And the second one, I'll not give you all the background details of where it comes from, but the comment is, the messenger of Allah said, by Allah, Allah will bring it forth on the day of resurrection, and it, talking of the Black Stone, it will have 2 eyes with which it will see, and a tongue with which it will speak, and it will testify in favour of those who touched it in sincerity. So according to Islamic prophecy, that Black Stone that you saw there on the Kaaba, which they worship towards 5 times a day, that Black Stone will have 2 eyes, a tongue, and will speak in favour of those who touched it in sincerity. It's not a great stretch of imagination to say it might well testify to those who didn't. And then beheading, here we come. So as a potential image that speaks and which will be worshipped, the Kaaba it ticks quite a few boxes. I'm not saying that dogmatically that is the image, but if you're looking for an image that Muslims worship, and they might worship today on a sort of voluntary basis, but it's a good habit they have in their eyes, But when you get to the end time, who's to say that the leadership of the final Islamic empire might not sort of turn the dial up on this, make a lot of these things absolutely mandatory on pain of death, which will be carried out. So you better worship the Kaaba. You better worship the black stone that will speak and testify, or might testify against you if you don't do those things, right? So that's a possibility. Another possibility, so, speculating again, another possibility is we find in Daniel chapter 3, if you want to turn there. It's the book of Daniel and chapter 3. There is an image in Daniel chapter 3. Not the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had, which is Daniel chapter 2, but in Daniel chapter 3 we have another image. And let's read verses 1 through 7. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold whose height, so he actually made this, not a dream, this is something he actually had constructed, whose height was 60 cubits and its width 6 cubits, that's 90 feet high, as high as a 9-story building, and 9 foot wide. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon, modern-day Iraq, and King Nebuchadnezzar sent word to gather together the satraps, the administrators, the governors, councillors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Everybody's invited. You probably can't decline the invitation, I imagine. So the satraps, administrators, governors, councillors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, all of them, they gathered together for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had stood up. Then a herald cried aloud, "To you it is commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that at the time you hear the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and bagpipes, in symphony with all kinds of music, you shall fall down and worship the gold image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace." So at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and symphony with all kinds of music, all the people, nations, and languages fell down and worshipped the gold image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So we know the story. It's quite familiar. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego come along a few verses later. But what people say when they're reading Revelation 13 and the image that you are to worship or be killed, right, is that we all know, most of us know at least, that the book of Revelation has lots of references back to the Old Testament, right? Scholars have figured out that anywhere between 500 references to the Old Testament can be found in the book of Revelation, 500 minimum. Some reckon as many as 800 references and allusions, not illusions, but allusions back to the Old Testament, and that there's 30 or 40 allusions to the book of Daniel that you can find in the book of Revelation, in the beast, the leopard, lion, bear, and so on. Straight away you go that one, right? So the thinking is, well, if you got in Revelation 13 an image that's to be worshipped or you be killed, well, that sounds very much like the book of Daniel. Nebuchadnezzar sets up an image which you got to worship or be killed. So very possibly the Revelation 13 reference to an image to be worshipped is just an echo, a modern day upgrade to Revelation, not to the book of Daniel, chapter 3. And the image, the gold image that you better worship or be killed. And you think, well, certainly looks very close. And if that is the case, then what would this image likely have been in Daniel chapter 3? Well, it's not a man, because the proportions, 90 feet high, 9 feet wide, that's not human proportions. So, scholars believe the most likely image is going to be an obelisk, right? Of which there are still some today in, I think, Washington, in London, certainly in Paris, in Istanbul. There's plenty of obelisks around. I think we've got a slide we can show you, some obelisks. So there's several there. You've probably seen some, depending if you've been to any particularly big cities. Obelisks are quite commonplace, were very popular in the ancient times, still quite popular today. Although today, if you're thinking of Islam, the modern day update on obelisks would be minarets, which you often see associated with mosques. Got a slide possibly. Yeah, so those are, looks like nuclear missiles, the ones on the left, but those are minarets, right? Which are essentially obelisks, but used for religious purposes, and you find them very often associated with mosques and so on, right? So what you get with minarets today is that 5 times a day there's a call to prayer from the minarets. So an Islamic priest goes into the minaret and switches on a recording or does it live himself, and he calls the faithful to prayer. 5 times a day you hear the call to prayer, you point your nose towards the Kaaba, right, and then you pray, right? So it's quite easy to imagine. It says in Revelation 13 that the image speaks. It's quite easy to imagine an obelisk or a minaret speaking, because a priest will be there somewhere calling in modern times through loudspeakers to the faithful to worship towards the Kaaba. I think we've got another slide that sort of shows that. So depends on how good your screen is, but you probably make out some little tiny things sticking out from the minaret there. On the one on the right, you can see it sticking out up in the balcony just at the left. The one in the middle, you can see perhaps a couple at the top there. And on the one on the left, I can see a couple at least on the bottom balustrade. These are loudspeakers because we live in modern times. So either the priest goes in and presses a button and a recording calls out to the faithful, time to pray towards Allah at the Kaaba in Mecca, or he does it himself, right, if he wants, and he's got a good voice. So you can understand how images, namely minarets, can talk, can speak, right, announcing the command to worship. So again, speculating a bit, but it's not impossible to imagine that perhaps the images are obelisks or minarets and they speak, right? Or the Kaaba itself and the Black Stone allegedly will speak in the end times. And it's an image that people can worship. Well, people do worship it. That's an image that people actually do worship today, right? But I guess the reality is that if we're a bit wide of the mark here, and it's neither the Black Stone nor a minaret type of obelisk, that if it's something else, when we get there, we'll probably recognize it. And we'll know what exactly it means when it says it's going to speak and have breath and so on. Okay, so that's sort of, I guess, a quick idea of what the image might be. But then you've got the mark. So let's just remind ourselves what Revelation says there, Revelation 13. Revelation 13, let's just read verses 16 and 17 to remind ourselves. He, talking of this false prophet, a religious man, he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. So this looks fairly important, right? Because if you don't have the mark, you can't buy or sell. What does that mean? It means you can't go to Walmart or Tesco's and buy groceries and food for the family. It means you can't drive up to the petrol filling station and fill your tank up with petrol or gas because you can't buy or sell. So there's not a lot you can do, right? So very important to take the mark of the beast so that you can buy and sell. So some people will justify to themselves, but of course other scriptures say if you do that, God will jump all over you. So that's not necessarily a good idea. I've said before that some people get concerned that, I might take the mark of the beast accidentally because perhaps it's the number 666 on some digits on my credit card or my mobile telephone, and I'm going to just be given it one day, and I've got a credit card and it's got 666 in the corner. Oh my word, I didn't realise I've got the mark of the beast. No. Mark of the beast isn't something you're going to take, by accident. Mark of the beast is primarily to do with your allegiance, your loyalty. To whom do you give your allegiance? Are you loyal to Jehovah God, or are you loyal to the charismatic leader of the Islamic Empire? Where's your loyalty? Where's your allegiance? I mean, people think that the leader of the Islamic Empire at the very end, the end time one, is going to be the guy referred to as the Mahdi, right? Charismatic, powerful, a great leader, and the 2 billion Muslims will flock right behind him. He's their man. Whatever he says, they will do, right? And there'll be great allegiance to that individual, to the Mahdi, right? The great leader. They're waiting for one. And somewhere along the way, he's going to turn up. And people will look to him and admire him and realize just what a powerful figure he is and what armies he's got at his control, and yield to him and acknowledge him and worship him, it seems, give him their allegiance. And the mark of the beast ties into one's allegiance. Right? Now, verse 17, there's a possible translation issue here, because in my New King James Version, it says, no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Now, there's 3 things that you might take. The mark, number 1. Secondly, the name. Thirdly, the number of his name. So 3 things there that you might take. Mark, or the name, or the number. Well, that translation is a minority translation, right? Because most say as follows. I've got 3 examples here. The NIV, the nearly inspired version. So they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of his name. It's not the mark or, but the mark which is the name or the number. So the mark isn't something separate. The mark is the beast's name or his number. That's what the mark is. Or you've got the ESV, the English Standard Version, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of his name. Then you've got the NET translation, the New English translation. Thus, no one was allowed to buy or sell things unless he bore the mark of the beast, dash, that is, his name or his number. So the mark's not something separate from the name or number. The mark is the name or number. Now, I looked at over 60 translations this morning. 45 of them translated that way. The mark is the name or number, right? So it's a majority position of the modern translators. Only a minority say mark or name or number, right? So certainly the name is pretty important, either because it's separately the name or because the mark is the name. And whose name do you bear? Whose name do I bear? Well, I guess we call ourselves Christians, bear the name of Christ, right? And we look to God, so we got God's name, if you like. But at the end time, some people will have the beast's name. A lot of people will give their allegiance to the beast and take the beast's name. They'll worship the beast. They are beast people, right? And of course, God's name, reveals his character, his identity, and it should be part of who we are. If we are Christians, we should be like Christ. If we worship the God of heaven, we should be a bit like the God of heaven. You can see this, I think, if we turn back to Exodus 13. We turn to Exodus chapter 13. Having the name of God, having the name of Christ, it's not super casual. There's real importance to it. Exodus 13 and 3, and then 9 to 10. So Exodus 13 and 3. And Moses said to the people, remember this day in which you went out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage, for by strength of hand the Lord brought you out of this place. No leavened bread shall be eaten. Well, you might remember these verses from the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Here's Israel about to make their escape from Egypt after the 10th plague, the death of the firstborn. And they are to remember this day, the 15th day of Abib, the feast of unleavened bread for 7 days. Remember it, says Moses. Why? Why should you remember it? Well, let's drop down to verses 9 and 10. Or maybe start verse 8. And you shall tell your son in that day, when you get to the promised land and your son says, why do we do these things? You shall tell your son in that day, saying, this is done because of what the Lord did for me when I came up from Egypt. It shall be as a sign to you on your hand and as a memorial between your eyes, that the Lord's law may be in your mouth. For with a strong hand the Lord has brought you out of Egypt. You shall therefore keep this ordinance in its season from year to year. And by doing it, it says there, it's a sign, which is like a mark. It's a sign on your hand, a memorial between your eyes. And the significance there appears to be that a sign on your hand reflects what you do, the actions you take. But most of us do things with our hands, right? So if it's in your right hand, say, that's sort of talking about what you do, the actions you take in life, pictured by your right hand, your strong right hand, or between your eyes, it's your forehead, right? And that's what you think. That's your ideas, your concepts, your values. So your hand and your forehead pretty much express what you do and what you think about, right? So that's something you should do there to remember the Lord your God, to remember his law, right? And so it's a sign, and the mark, of course, is also a sign. This is a sign that we belong to God. We follow his ways. We keep the statutes he gives us, and that's visible in our hand and between our eyes and our forehead. Have a look at Deuteronomy chapter 6. Deuteronomy chapter 6. Let's read verses 4 through 9. Hear, O Israel, this is Moses talking to the people before they go across Jordan into the promised land. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. That's your allegiance. You're going to be loyal to Jehovah God. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. So the words of God, the instructions of God, to be in your heart, but also, verse 8, bind them as a sign on your hand, as frontlets between your eyes. In other words, your forehead. So your hand and your forehead. And that's where you should be reminded of the words of God, the instructions of God, the commandments of God, whom you're to love with all your heart. You're to keep his words within your heart, right? It says there in verse 8, they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. The complete Jewish Bible says, put them at the front of a headband around your forehead, right? So they're taking it, complete Jewish Bible, not surprisingly, taking it very much literally, physically, although I suspect it should really be more about your mind rather than tying something around your head that you never even look at, and certainly don't obey any of the words that are there, right? I don't think God just wants a piece of material tied around your forehead, right? He wants you to live it, right? But you can see the reference there. It's a sign on your hand and on your forehead, right, between your eyes. And it's a sign of your allegiance, right? Your loyalty. And having the right name is going to be a key in the end times. Whose name will people have in the end times? The name of Jehovah God, or the name of the Mahdi, the leader of the Islamic Empire, acting on behalf of Satan the devil? Whose name will people have, right? How will you recognize one from another? If you turn to Revelation 3, so Revelation chapter 3, and verse 12, this is one of the 7 letters, this one to the letter of Philadelphia. And like I said before, it's my speculation. Each of these 7 letters is addressed to each year during the final 7 years. So the letter to Philadelphia will be for the brethren living in year number 6 of those final 7 years. That's my speculation, right? But we're going to pick up verse 12. He who overcomes, I'll make him a pillar in the temple of my God, and he shall go out no more. And I'll write on him the name of my God, and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which comes down out of heaven from my God, and I'll write on him my new name. Whatever that might be, some mystery about Jesus' new name. I mean, today we carry the name of Christ. If you're a Christian, that means that you bear the name of Jesus Christ. And of course, you worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the Creator God. So today we have God's name and Christ's name, right? And that's going to be, if anything, made even bigger and more important in times ahead, that we bear the name of God, that we bear the name of Jesus Christ, and at some point in the future, his new name, right? So the name's important. The name's an identifying feature. It's a family name. Have a look at Revelation 22. So how bad would it be to have the wrong name, to have the beast's name all over you, rather than the name of the Creator God, right? So Revelation 22, let's read verses 1 to 4. And he, this angel, showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding from the throne of God and of the Lamb. In the middle of its street and on either side of the river was the tree of life, which bore 12 fruits, each tree yielding its fruit every month. The leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. And there shall be no more curse, but the throne of God and of the Lamb shall be in it, and his servants shall serve him. They shall see his face, and his name shall be on their foreheads. Right? So God's name is on the foreheads of God's servants in the New Jerusalem. Of course, it's the family name. Forehead, the name of God. Right? So what's the connection to the beast? Well, like it said earlier, the mark is the name of the beast or his number. It could be the mark or the name, but like I said, 45 out of 60 odd translations say the mark is the name or the number. So if you're talking the mark of the beast, there's a pretty good chance it's his name. So rather than bearing the name of Jehovah God, bearing the name of Jesus Christ, many people will bear the name of the beast, right? So the saints will have the sign of God on their hand and forehead, and it looks like the followers of the beast will have the mark of the beast on their hands or the foreheads, right? Not a good place to be, because really that will demonstrate and publicly acknowledge your allegiance, right? These people will be loyal to the beast. They will worship the beast. They will acknowledge the beast. They will follow the beast. They will give their resources, perhaps their money, their time, their energy to the beast, not to God, not to Jehovah, right? So if you're looking about what could this mark be, which has associations to the name of the beast and so on, what could the mark be? Well, there's options again. Time to speculate. I mean, one that's been speculated about increasingly over the last few decades has been perhaps it's some sort of microchip which identifies you as a follower of the beast. So they'll put a microchip into your hand or your wrist or your forehead, right? Boom. Gets injected in. Very small nowadays. I think they can do this. They've been doing it, I think, here and there experimentally. And of course, if this were correct, if this was in fact what the mark is, some sort of a device that's implanted because you're a paid-up follower of the beast, then that could contain your personal details. You know, your height, your weight, your eye colour, your political affiliations, you're a Democrat, a Republican, Labour, Liberal, Conservative, Reform, whatever, right? And of course it could have your religion, Episcopalian, Catholic, Pentecostal, Church of God, whatever, right? And of course You might have your bank details. Why not? Then you could just wave your hand over a sensor and it could debit your bank account because all the personal information's there. And of course, unfortunately, if you were to fall out with the government of the day, they might have said, you know what, don't like that guy's profile. He's watching too much YouTube of such and such a character. I don't like that at all. So let's just switch off his bank account. And suddenly, the chip that you've got in your hand or in your forehead somewhere, it doesn't work any longer. Now you can't buy or sell. You can't get petrol for your car. You can't buy any food because you've been cancelled because of the microchip around which everything in your life now works. And that microchip's only available to people who are in good standing with the beast. But okay, it's speculative. But I think it's increasingly plausible. I don't think it's going to be that personally, but like I said earlier, when you're looking at prophecy, we can know the narratives, we can know the words, the texts that we read, exactly how they work out in practical terms in front of our eyes. I'd have to give a little bit of rope there, a little bit of wiggle room there. So it could be a microchip of some sort. Personally, don't think so, but it's plausible, and a lot of people do think that's the answer. Another one that I was quite familiar with growing up is it would be enforced Sunday worship. So the mark of the beast is being refused the opportunity to keep the seventh-day Sabbath as your holy day, and you'd be forced to work on Saturdays, and you'd be forced to take Sundays off as your day of worship, assuming you want to worship, right? That's the one I grew up believing for many decades. I think its origins start with the Seventh-day Adventist movement back in the 1800s. They thought the American government would at some point in time ban Sabbath keeping, right, and demand Sunday keeping, and that would be a cause of tension and persecution and so on. Now, today, that idea is only get any validity if we're expecting a Roman Empire to be the bad guy, right? Because the thinking is that what would happen is you got the Roman Empire in cahoots, so to speak, with the papacy or the Vatican. And so the Roman Catholic Church would outlaw Sabbath keeping and demand Sunday worship. Well, if it's not Rome, I've said various reasons why I don't think it is Rome. If it's not Rome, then the idea of the Roman Catholic Church doing anything like this is it's a non-starter. And I think it is a non-starter, right? But then there's another one, right? Speculation time coming up. If the end-time beast is Islamic, there's another possibility, speculative possibility. So have a look at Revelation 13 again. Now let's read verse 18 this time. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 66, and the mark is the name or the number. So the mark can be the number, right? And it says here the number is 666, so that's going to be the mark, right? I think you're probably aware that in many languages, the letters of the alphabet double up as numbers in their system, like in all the biblical languages, Hebrew, Greek, Latin as well. Right? In Latin, X is the number 10, V is the number 5, and so on. So the Greek language does the same, and in Greek, the number 666 comes from three Greek letters, chi, psi, and stigma. Chi being 600, psi being 60, and stigma being 6, so 666. So these are three Greek letters which give you 666. So the speculation is, what if, it's not exactly wild speculation, but it is certainly along the speculative route quite a bit. What if the Apostle John didn't actually write these three Greek letters that come to 666? What if that's not what he did? What if in his vision the Apostle John saw three symbols been worn by millions and millions of the beast's followers, and he didn't so much write them down as 3 Greek letters, but tried to draw them, right? Because it just so happens that there are 3 symbols, Arabic symbols, which look just like the Greek letters for 666, right? So what could have happened, this is speculation of course, is John tries to draw as clearly as he can these 3 symbols he sees on these millions of followers of the beast, and he draws them as best he can, and then along comes a Greek copyist afterwards writing their version of the book of Revelation. They get to this point and think, oh, I think John must have had too much whiskey that day. I mean, these letters are scruffy. That's not the way to write high science stigma. I'll do a better job than John did. So he corrects it, so to speak, and then it's copied that way, of course, for the next nearly 2,000 years. So John's carefully drawn symbols turn into 3 Greek letters that come to 666, but that's not how they started. So there are these 3 symbols which are almost identical to the Greek. They're very, very close. I think we've got at least 1 or 2 slides here coming up. So there at at the top box, those are the 3 Greek letters for 666, right? And then the bottom box, you've got the Arabic, the Arabic for in the name of Allah. So in the Arabic, you start on the right and move to the left. So you can probably see you've got this sort of snake squiggle in the middle. The top picture is vertical. The bottom picture is sort of lying down like a snake, the letter W. Then you get this long curvy bit on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, they look very similar to each other. It's like an X. Well, what you've got there is on the bottom one, which is the Arabic, you've got the 2 letters on the right, which you might just be able to read it there. It says, in the name of Allah. And then the cross swords are the Islamic symbol of victory and eventually worldwide dominion. So the bottom slide says, in the name of Allah with cross swords, which happens to mirror the Greek letters for 666, right? I think we can one more slide. Yeah, that's known as Bismillah. The 2 letters on the right-hand side, Bismillah, in the name of Allah. You might remember the Queen song many years ago when I was a child, Bohemian Rhapsody. Halfway through that, it's a well-known song. I think I was in my 20s at the time, to be fair. But halfway through it goes, Bismillah, da-da-da-da-da, Bismillah, which means in the name of Allah. So the 2 characters on the right hand there in that bottom box read Bismillah, in the name of Allah. And then the cross at the left is just the cross swords, which is a standard symbol of expected worldwide victory of Islam over the world. Right, so that's a bit odd then. So it may not be 666 because the letters look very, very similar. I mean, to a casual observer, I mean, if you're an expert in Arabic, expert in Greek, you're like, oh, no, they're quite different. But most of us aren't experts. And the copyist who copied Apostle John's writings might not have realized that John had something else in mind there. It wasn't 666, it was Bismillah and a cross sword, right? So that's pretty close. But if we go back to verse 18 again, there's something else to bring out here. You've got, here is wisdom, let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast. King James says, count the number of the beast, count it. I think that might be a little bit better. So let him who has understanding count the number of the beast. And the word number there is in Greek arithmos, as in arithmetic, right? And it just means a multitude. Doesn't mean necessarily a specific number like 11 or 21 or 103. It just means a multitude, like a number. You might say a huge number of people went to the football game. A multitude went to the football game. So multitude and number mean pretty much the same. So it could be, let him who has understanding count the multitude of the beast. right? Not a number as in 22, but the multitude as in just the general number. The number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. Well, which man is particularly important in Islam? If this is all to do with Islam, which I believe it is. Islam's the real problem in the world today, not the Roman Catholic Church or Holy Roman Empire. But it's a number of a man. Which man features universally in Islam? Well, Muhammad, the Prophet. And in fact, many people still refer to Muslims as Mohammedans. They're named after Muhammad, just as Christians are named after Christ. So the name of a man could well be the name Mohammed. Most popular name, by the way, in Britain for baby boys. It used to be John when I was a youngster. John was the most popular, and then changes from time to time. Oliver was popular for a while, and so on. But now the most popular name for young boys being registered in Britain is Mohammed. Right? So the name of a man could be talking of the man Mohammed, in which case verse 18 can be translated as, let him who is understanding count the multitude of a man Mohammed. His multitude comes in 666, the name of Allah. Right? So in other words, let me read that again. So I'm going to swap the 666 for in the name of Allah, because that's what the Arabic symbols tell us, Bismillah, in the name of Allah. So that would be, let him who is understanding count the multitude of the beast. For as the multitude of the man Muhammad, his multitude comes in the name of Allah. Right? So many Muslims do bear that mark, that name on their persons. They have bandanas. I was going to say bananas, but they're not bananas. They have bandanas wrapped around their forehead, right? They have things wrapped around their wrist, on their arms, hands and arms, bearing Bismillah, right? And so on. I think we've got a slide, perhaps one more slide. It's our last slide. So Chi, Si, Stigma are the three Greek letters, which are very similar. It's not easy to make them out there, because what they do sometimes is, these are more artistic in some ways, so they're a bit stylized. So rather than writing out Bismillah and the cross swords, they often sort of decorate using those symbols. You can probably see the snake on the top one, and the X, I think it's on the right side there, and the guy in the middle at the bottom, you've got a green bandana, the letters are there as well. So what you've got is that, particularly the jihadists, the military guys, they bear the name of Allah on their person. They come, they fight, they bomb, they cut heads off in the name of Allah. Bismillah. Right? So in other words, the mark that they carry on their foreheads or on their wrists and arms is the name of Allah, because they come in the name of Allah. That's who their allegiance is to. They are loyal to Allah. At the end times, as people perhaps convert voluntarily or under pressure, under force to Islam, and give their allegiance to Allah and to the Prophet of Allah, Muhammad, and bear and start carrying these marks and devices on their body, it's going to be an insult to God, because Jesus Christ came, died for mankind, shed his blood, buried, resurrected, ascended to heaven. So to give your allegiance to another God, Allah, right, and to wear, characters, symbols of Allah and his prophet Muhammad is not a good idea at all. And of course, in the end times, it might be that the powerful leader of the Islamic world of that time, the Mahdi, the Caliph, whatever, might make all these things mandatory. So whereas at the moment people might choose whether they do want to wear such garments or not, it might well be that when we get to the end times, it's not up to you whether you voluntarily want to go along with it. It might be mandated. You need to do this. You need to wear those. You need to have that mark. Or you'll be beheaded, right? Because that's what it says in Revelation 20. Let's turn there just to finish off. Revelation 20 and verse 4. I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was committed to them. Then I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for their witness to Jesus and for the word of God. So they were committed, their allegiance, their loyalty is to Jesus Christ and his Father, who had not worshipped the beast or his image, perhaps the Kaaba, had not received his mark on their foreheads or on their hands, and they lived with Christ, reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. But they had been beheaded for not worshipping the beast or its image and not receiving the mark on their foreheads or on their hands. And for not doing that, they are beheaded. And you know as well as I do which particular group have always, for 1,400 years plus, used beheading as their standard default approach to dealing with opposition. Okay, well, I guess the thing is that whilst we've speculated here and there, we certainly can be familiar with the narrative, and when these things come to pass, when you see something they think that is the image, and that's the mark, that's the name, when that comes to pass in real time, hopefully we'll be better equipped to see it. In the meantime, we just do our best to be prepared and ready for whatever comes our way. Okay, with that, we'll conclude today's Bible study.